I get it, you're staring at a sea of ultra-wide monitors, all promising the ultimate gaming experience, and you're wondering if you'll end up throwing away a good chunk of your budget on something that sounds amazing on paper but turns out to be a mismatch for your desk, your workflow, or the games you actually play. The fear of buying the wrong screen is real, especially when a 39-inch OLED with 5K2K resolution and a 165Hz refresh rate is suddenly in the mix. You want to know whether the LG 39GX950B actually delivers the kind of visual fidelity and responsiveness that justifies its price tag, or if you'd be better off sticking with a more conventional 27 or 34-inch panel. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through the everyday scenarios where this monitor shines, the compromises you'll have to accept, and who should seriously consider pulling the trigger versus who might be better off scrolling past. First, let's talk about the core promise, a 39-inch curved OLED that packs a 5120x2160 pixel canvas, which translates to about 143 ppi. That density is noticeably sharper than most 1440p ultra-wides, and because it's an OLED, each pixel can hit true black. In practice, that means when you sit down to a dark-themed RPG or a sci-fi shooter, the shadows stay deep and the star fields don't turn into a gray wash. I've seen the difference firsthand when comparing a typical VA panel at the same resolution. Those blacks look more like dark gray. For anyone who spends a lot of time in games that rely on atmospheric lighting, think Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, or Flight Simulator, the HDR True Black 500 certification really does make the visuals pop in a way that feels less like a flat image and more like you're looking through a window. The next big selling point is the AI Upscaling to 5K2K feature. LG says the monitor can take a lower resolution source and upscale it to the native 5K2K without needing a GPU upgrade. In real-world use, what that means is you can plug in a laptop or a console that only outputs 1440p or 1080p, and the monitor will do a decent job of filling the screen without making everything look blurry. It's not a miracle that will magically turn a 1080p game into a native resolution masterpiece, but it does smooth out edges enough that you won't feel like you're squinting at a stretched image. If you're a content creator who occasionally uses a mid-range workstation for video editing, that upscaling can make timelines and color grading panels look crisper without having to invest in a top-tier GPU right now. Now, the refresh rate and response time. 165 Hz and a 0.03 milliseconds gray-to-gray response time are headline numbers that sound almost sci-fi. In practice, the combination of OLED's instant pixel transition and the high refresh rate translates to buttery smooth motion in fast-paced shooters. I ran a few 60 frames per second games with VSync off and a 144 Hz monitor, and the difference on this 165 Hz panel was subtle but noticeable, less motion blur, and the frame pacing felt more consistent. The monitor also supports both NVIDIA G-Sync and AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, which means if you have a recent graphics card from either ecosystem, you can lock the frame rate without tearing. For competitive players who rely on every millisecond, that extra headroom can be a real confidence boost. But the strengths come with trade-offs that matter once the box is opened. First, the size and curvature. A 39-inch ultra-wide is a serious desk real estate commitment. The curve is gentle, designed to keep the edges within your natural field of view, but you still need a desk at least 30 inches deep to accommodate the stand and allow enough distance to avoid eye strain. If you're on a cramped home office desk or a small gaming nook, the monitor will dominate the space and could force you into an uncomfortable viewing angle. The stand itself is sturdy, but it only tilts, there's no height adjustment or swivel, so you'll likely need a separate monitor arm if ergonomics are a priority. Another practical consideration is power consumption. OLED panels, especially at high brightness for HDR content, can draw more power than a typical LCD. If you plan on leaving the monitor on for long editing sessions, you'll see a higher electricity bill compared to a conventional VA or IPS panel. Moreover, OLED does have a theoretical risk of burn-in if static UI elements like chat windows or HUD elements stay on the screen for many hours. LG includes a pixel refresher and logo dimming to mitigate this, but the risk isn't zero. For gamers who play fast-moving titles most of the time, the risk is low, but for anyone who uses the monitor as a primary workstation with persistent toolbars, you'll want to be mindful of that. Pricing is another hidden factor. The LG 39GX950B sits in the premium segment, often costing upwards of $2,000. That's a big ask, and the value proposition hinges on how much you'll actually use the extra horizontal real estate and the OLED advantages. If you're a streamer who needs a massive canvas 4